She wanted, yeah, just do the ink. She wanted Pachelbel, so we might switch to another book and then
Okay,
switch
that's
back.
fine.
People always do that. Let's keep your place in this, but let's skip to Pachelbel, which is in probably near the back. I think it's this one that starts with trumpet tune.
It's just, my part is
Oh,
same,
this,
isn't it? Or,
oh, this book.
Yeah.
It's number 9.
I mean,
Sorry,
do
I
I
skipped
just,
over.
no, it's okay. I just want to make sure. If I just have the, do you know if my part is, I actually
Should be.
complicated.
We know your
Pretty
part's
much the same.
complicated, so.
I mean, I don't need the music if it's that, but if it's a trio version and it's actually like there's actual stuff in it. Which album is it?
This one. Should be in the back. Either the back or maybe the last one even. Starts with rehearsal trumpet tune. It is album volume 1. Wedding album volume 1.
Did you accidentally put it on your stand, Emily?
Yeah.
Okay, and what number?
9.
Should we start just at the beginning then?
Yeah, just do the
It is
in the
just
beginning.
just the normal part. Not really the classic.
book now and go back to where we were. And the next one, let's see. We're gonna do let's do Ponies and Jello Goose 7.
One second. Let me make sure I'm getting this confused with anything.
I'll call each book.
How fast is this?
You might know when that starts.
Yeah, I start with it. I just have full notes though.
So I forgot the tempo of that.
17. No, you know what? We're going to skip that one, I think. We're going to do 26. You said the two.
How does this go then?
Oh, do you want to do the repeat?
No, I don't think so. I think we're doing okay on this.
690. Okay.
Yeah, we can do 6. Let's do the Pilgrim's Chorus, which is 27/28.
Okay, that's a very short repeat. You want to do that at
No.
17? Just go straight on. Okay.
let's do 5. Can you do Thais or no? It's up to
We
you.
can do Thais.
Okay. Let's do Thais. switching books again. Okay. So now we are doing this volume 1, Music Mercury, Black Spiral. I'm going to do number 6.
There's quite a draft.
Let's see what number 6 is.
that Schubert Andante or?
Let me see. 10 and 12. Let's do, you know what, let's skip this book. Let's skip this book.
Okay.
And
Do
let's
any of
get
the
out,
Celtic or?
we keep that handy. We are going to do, on the left-hand side of your folder, you have Gabriel's Oboe and the Ludlows. Let's do that. Let's do Gabriel's Oboe.
It's on the left-hand side.
Yes. Should be the first one or second one there.
The score.
Gabriel's Oboe. Yes. To start on part 2.
Hold on a minute. 6.
We're going to do more stuff on the left-hand side. So, What a Wonderful World.
What a wonderful world.
Yes. Can we do the ink?
Let me double check. Yeah.
Or just go to, let's just do the whole, just do it. It's another 2-page piano score.
Sorry, I can't find it.
Okay. Just play it straight down.
But the ink with the DS and all that.
No, no,
Oh,
no
really?
DS.
That'll work? Okay.
let's do the Barclay Square. Might not be the last
I
page.
can't hear you.
Barclay Square.
Okay.
We do not do the first page. It's a
Okay.
3-pager without the first page. So you start on the words.
Hold on a second. Blowing around.
Remember, there's a first and second ending. So we'll just do one verse.
Go straight to the second one.
We started the chorus.
Thank you for coming, everyone. We appreciate you being here. I know it means a great deal to the family. Before we get started, there are a few people I'd like to recognize. First, are there players here from Transy? I know there are players here from Charlotte. I know there are some from South Florida, Purdue. Would you guys stand and be recognized, please? And how about those who might be here as a result of their affiliation with Lee in the NBA? Thank you very much. My name is Dave Taylor. I'm the former Sports Information Director here at Charlotte, and had the great pleasure of working with Lee. It's important for us today to introduce this as a celebration. And I say a celebration because as I look around, I know there are people who will celebrate the life and the legacy, the impact that Lee had on our lives for many, many times to come. So our first speaker played for Lee at Purdue, had a great career in the NBA, and I would like to recognize and ask to come forward Joe Barry Carroll.
I don't know who put that down there. He was feeling tall. All right. Okay, just so you know, this whole writing stuff down is something you learn from Coach, because he has notes everywhere. Excuse me. Thank you all for coming. Coach Lee Hyden Rose, this giant of a gentleman, has left an impression each place he's passed through. So it is with his impression upon me. I'm grateful for his contributions to my life as my teacher. He's coached just about one of every type of player there is, major to minor, always getting the best out of us. He applied an enlightened approach that got the best of what a player had to offer, focusing on what his student had, not what he was missing. I met him 44 years ago when he became my coach at Purdue University. He came along at a time that I desperately need his brand of teaching on basketball. He led us to the NIT. We went to the Final Four. We traveled to Russia representing the United States in the Spartakiad. I mean, who does all of that, really? That's a couple of people's careers. Even after all these years later, his players delight when someone recognizes one of us as having played for Coach Rose. People who know basketball knows that means something. Coach loomed so large in his presence that it was only recently that I paid attention to a photo of him standing near me that I recognized I'm a foot taller than he is. Because all the guys will tell you he's really fierce, and you just lose sight of whatever height he is. I'm sure he might have said 6 feet, but he wasn't a legal 6 feet. Beyond just basketball, he honored me by becoming my friend after having been my teacher at such a critical time in my development as a young basketball player. Coach and I had continued to create all these wonderful memories. It sometimes felt like the popular book by Dr. Seuss, "Oh, the places you'll go." You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. This is the way it was with Coach. He was always going to shake something up for the good. We traveled all over the world, entertaining passerbys along the way, when they wondered sometimes out loud, is that Coach Rose? And I wonder who his bodyguard used to be. In later years, we spent time at Hilton Head, Charlotte, and Atlanta, where I now live. We have long conversations about politics, society, religion, our family challenges, literature, and any other subject that comes up. If it came up, it came out, no filter. On one of the visits, the topic of Coach's memoir came up. Coach had already written books on technical and fundamental instructions on basketball, but I was committed to have the world know the other part of this serious but private man. I write and publish books myself. When I offered to help, Coach accepted and trusted me to co-write his memoir. One of my challenges with Coach while working on his memoir was his deep and ever-present humility. It remained a challenge to just get him to state his glorious facts. In some ways, he felt it inappropriate to toot his own horn. He seemed committed to live and be judged by what he does, not just what he says. He would remind me that back home, we believe that it's for others to tell how good you are. So I decided to just toot his horn for myself. I kept asking for more details on all those important historical and popular people he met along the way. Coach has walked with presidents, senators, literary agents, and other important folk, but he always seemed unaffected by them unless he thought them to be good people. I would ask him why he did this, that, or the other thing. Coach would say, "Joe," this is my Lee Rose impression, hold on. "Joe, you asking me why did I cross the street? I was on that side, and I wanted to be on the other side, so I crossed the street to get to the other side. It's that simple. What don't you understand?" Then he'd give me the look that he gives when he had me against the ropes, saying, "Joe, I thought you were brighter than this." We both laughed, and I retreated to Google to look it up for myself. I remain impressed by Coach's simple replies that leave me with more than I came with. Like this one time on campus, one day before practice when I was trying to get all philosophical, Coach had simply said to me, "Joe, you look like you're ready." Me being far too serious launched into the complicated explanation of readiness and preparedness, because before I could finish, he interrupted me to say, "Joe, I'm just saying hey." He always had the last word with me. Even now, as I'm about to take my seat, I will wonder in my head if he approves of my comments. I've heard it said that grief is the price that we pay when we lose someone we love. While I accept that in part, I'm looking forward to the shift one day from my grief at losing Coach Lee Rose to that place when I can return to enjoying all the incredible memories that we created and shared. I'm eternally grateful for him, and I'm eternally grateful to him.
Before I bring up our next speaker, Joe Barry, thank you for your part in this book. If you have not read it, I would find it and read it because it'll give you a definitive insight into the man Lee Rose as well as the coach. There's a part in here about, I just want to ask the former players, does the phrase "touch the line" mean anything to any of you guys? Well, for those of you who don't know, we're going to have a little session upstairs afterwards. Ask any of these players that stood up what "touch the line" means. I think they'd be happy to tell you. Our next presenter is a friend that I haven't seen for 47 years, but I still consider him a friend. Everett Bass, or as the Niners call him, E-Bass, is a former player at Trancey. He was the head assistant coach here at Charlotte, also Purdue and South Florida. So, Everett.
Thank you, Dave, and good afternoon to all. I want to thank Elo, Mark, Mike, and the entire Rose family for allowing me to be a part of this celebration of life for Lee Rose. I don't have enough time to talk about Mark and Mike as gym rats when I was at Transy. And don't have enough time to talk about Elo. We all love Elo, and she was the glue to this family. And so many times we would watch film, and she would fix sandwiches for us. But I don't have enough time to talk about all of that. My journey with Lee Rose was 54 years. My journey started when he recruited me at Transylvania University. And, you know, Joe's talked about Coach being intellectual, and I go into his office. He's recruiting me now, and there's a whiteboard in that office, and there's like 10 or 12 players' names. My name ain't up there, okay? And we had a workout right after that meeting up there, and after that workout, me, the players, and Coach Rose knew that I was better than anybody he had out there in my position. So needless to say, I played for Coach. I was there for 4 years, and you know, the interesting thing about Coach is that he was kind of a funny guy in a lot of ways, but the first day of practice, conditioning, he believed that you got in shape and then played. A lot of coaches believe that you play into shape. The first day of practice in the gym, there were like 4 of these containers, and about a half an hour into the practice, we understood what these garbage containers were for. Most of the players visited those containers, and that's after running the 1/8 of a mile, and we had to run it in like 45 seconds. So that was my first introduction to playing for Coach. He did some things that, you know, we didn't understand at the time. We had a player, and none of my teammates from Transylvania are here, but we had a guy at Transylvania. His name was Terry Blanc. Terry was 6'10" and weighed about 300 pounds, give or take a pound or two. And we called him Thunder, you know, because he's such a big guy. And one day in practice, Coach said, "Terry, Thunder, Thunder. Hell, you ain't nothing but a big clap." And that was Coach. Now, he got me, I can remember the first time he got me as a freshman. We were playing on the road at a place called Union College. People in Kentucky would know that. But we had a guy named Jim Hurley, was a great player, and Coach never had anything to say bad about Jim because Jim never had a bad game. But anyway, we had a guard that, and some of you guys have played for Coach, understand that, you know, he wanted the guards to run the show, and man, he broke this one guy, and I'm not going to call his name. He broke him down like a double-barrel shotgun. He brought him to cheers. He was crying. And then when he got to me, he said, "And E, hell, you ain't nothing but a homer." And what that means is I couldn't play on the road. I could only play at home. But that was Coach. That was Coach. But Coach was an interesting guy. He cared about you as an individual. You know, he's always wanting us to be Renaissance men like him. We were required to listen to Earl Nightingale. And there's probably maybe a few people in here who know who Earl Nightingale is or was. This is Earl Nightingale. Earl Nightingale was an American radio speaker and author dealing with the subject of human character, development, motivation, and meaningful existence. He did a 5-minute radio commentary program called Our Changing World. Now, me and my freshman teammates, we didn't sign up for that. We came here to play basketball. But that was Coach. That was Coach, you know, so we dealt with that. And, you know, I played 4 years at Transy, had a great career, and, you know, we set all kinds of records. And I left the school as a leading rebounder, leading scorer. And my record, 50 years, still stands. I'm still the leading rebounder at Transylvania University. So I thank Coach for coaching me. And after I left Transy as a player, he was still involved with my life. He had hooked me up with one of our senators, so I got a job with the Highway Department in Kentucky, and Senator Mike Maloney. So that was Coach still reaching out, touching me. 3 years later, he calls me and he says, "Well, why don't you come down to Charlotte and work with me as an assistant coach?" Now, Coach was really brilliant in the fact that he hired 2 assistant coaches. Mike Pratt, may Mike's soul rest in peace. He's not with us anymore, but his kids are here. But Mike and I joined Coach Rose. Never coached a day, Mike or I, but Coach was great at putting the pieces to the puzzle to make it fit, i.e. taking Melvin Watkins, who was a 6'3" forward, turning him into an outstanding point guard. And Coach would do unique things. He'd let Maxwell dribble the ball up the court. And every time Max would dribble that ball up that court, and we'd go between his legs, Coach would grab me on my thigh. But it worked out. Coach liked big guards, and we were playing in Syracuse, and as you guys from UNCC will remember, Syracuse had a really good team. They had a 7-foot guy named Bowie, and they had 2 guards who were 5'10", really, really good players. We played a 2-3 zone, and those guards went 4 for 24, and we beat them by 20-something points. But Coach was really great at X's and O's and strategy, so on and so forth. And, you know, we had 2 great years at Purdue when we left UNCC, and Coach Joe Barry was the #1 draft pick, and again, Coach was doing his thing. He's coaching against the best coaches in the country, Bobby Knight and Judd Heathcote and Lou Olson, and played against some of the best players up there in terms of Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas. This guy could really coach the game, did his thing up there, NIT Finals and the Final Four. Well, Elo got tired of Indiana, so we go to South Florida, and I go to South Florida with him. I said, well, you know, this coaching thing is pretty easy. You know, I've been coaching 5 years. I got 2 NIT Finals and 2 Final Fours. I said, man, this is pretty sweet. Well, about 3 or 4 years into our deal at South Florida, it became pretty apparent that some of the commitments that were made to Coach Rose, they weren't being fulfilled. So Coach decided to leave. He had an agreement with the president, and the deal was if he left, there were 4 things that Coach asked him to do. Coach leaves, and they did 3 of the things that he asked him to do, but the 4th thing was to make me the head coach. That didn't happen. So here I am, you know, I'm down there at South Florida, you know, so I had a year on my contract. I was smart enough to sign that contract, and I worked in the Institute of Government. And about a year into that, I went to an interview with the city of Tampa. They had a position called the Director of Sanitation. I interviewed, and in that interview, there were 8 panelists, and towards the end of that interview, one of the panelists said, well, why do you seem to be so comfortable? How do you know so much about this? Well, I said, well, when I was at Transylvania, I worked on the back of a trash truck. Bingo, that's Lee Rose. That trash truck job came as a result of me working through a summer job that Coach Rose got for me. So Coach really impacted my life in many ways. I learned a lot from Coach. I had a great career, you know, managing men and women, and I used some of the things that he had taught me. You know, things like proper preparation prevents poor performance. You don't have to be on time, just be early. There's no I in team. All of those things were things that I used as a director and as a manager. And, you know, I had a great career. I was one of the leading garbologists in the country. And, you know, all of these things came about as a result of my friendship with Coach. He's my coach, my mentor, and I learned a lot from him. And I learned a lot of things to do, and although I learned some things not to do. She don't understand that. And I'm just so thankful that I knew Coach, and I've been blessed in a lot of ways, but one of the biggest blessings that I had was to have Coach Rose in my life. So God bless you, Elo and Mark and Mike and the family, and thank you all for being here.
We're about to get into the presentations from the family, and what better way to start that off than to ask Elo to step forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor Rose.
I better pull it way down. I just want to say that when I saw everybody here today, it felt like a blessing. It felt like a moment of grace, and it felt like the hugs that we used to give more freely, and we need, especially in this world today. I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for your kinship. I thank you, those that were colleagues of Lee's. I thank you for the bond, for being here, for the bonds that bring us together. And that was Lee. And he was a good man. I am truly humbled that you are here today.
Thank you, Eleanor. As I mentioned, we're about to get into some presentations by family members, and I'd like to bring up and introduce Lee and Eleanor's daughter-in-law, Denise Rose, and following Denise will be Jim Tackett, the Executive Director of Forward in the Fifth.
Thanks, Elo. Thanks. Appreciate that. It is a beautiful sight to see all of you here today. Thank you. Thank you that you love Lee as much as we love Lee. Most of you have traveled very far to be here today, and we really appreciate that. One of the first conversations I remember having with Lee, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and he asked me, "Do you read?" It took me back. I was an adult. I wrote and read reports all day long. What was he talking about? He said, "Do you read for inspiration? Do you read for knowledge? Do you read for fun?" It mattered to Lee that I was a reader. It mattered to Lee that everybody was a reader. Lee loved books. He wrote a book. He wrote 3. He loved them. You never saw him without a book. He had many going all the time. He kept Elo busy going back and forth to the post office because he'd find a book that struck a place in his heart. He'd ask her to buy so many copies, and out they would go. Friends and family, we would receive it, and we knew we had to read it, and we knew he'd want to report back on the book at some point. It was his way of instilling wisdom in us, teaching us. After he retired from the NBA and when he was coaching in the D-League and here back professionally with Charlotte, he began volunteering with Forward in the Fifth. He was from Kentucky, the poverty-stricken, drug-infested hills of Kentucky. And he and Elo started out for many, many years dodging their schedules with basketball, and they would visit middle schools and high schools, and they would give them gifts. They would inspire these children. They would give them hope. He would say, "I'm from here too. You can make it out." Mark and I used to love to hear their stories as they were on the road. And we began to see them change as we saw this process. Lee would go into those schools and he would realize how far he had come. That he was that kid in that school. And here he was living his best life. Many times he has told us that the thing he is most proud of in his life work, was with Forward in the Fifth. That's pretty incredible with all the things that he accomplished. But he's most proud of his service to others. And that was Lee. That's why we love him. That was the most satisfying part of his life. Thank you.
So not long after I began my role as executive director of a small nonprofit education organization called Forward in the Fifth, Coach Rose reached out to me via email asking if I had interest in working on a student outreach initiative together. As we continued to talk over the next few months about his middle school program and how we would reach nearly 1/4 of the state's geographic area in Kentucky, he was not going to be denied. The message he had was meant to be shared far and wide, and the longer we talked, the longer it was going to take to reach young people who needed to hear his words, his passion, and his genuine love. Coach Rose and LO's desire to visit each of Forward in the Fifth's 45 counties in Kentucky's 5th Congressional District. The message would be generated from his life experiences and lessons learned as he guided primarily 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students in goal setting, understanding the value of obtaining an education, and using it as a stepping stone for an unlimited future. As Coach Rose voiced repeatedly with numerous groups of young people, if I, a kid from Estill County, Kentucky, can capture the opportunity and success via an education and hard work, there is no reason any of you cannot do the same. As I traveled the hills and hollers of southern and eastern Kentucky, an area frequently identified then and today as some of the highest poverty-stricken counties in the United States, students and adults alike were sponges absorbing each word and experience shared by Coach. His illustrations highlighted several of you, former players, family members, and even interactions with hotel and restaurant staff from time to time. He pinpointed essential virtues of success like determination, self-concept, positive attitude, and perseverance, again, which you demonstrate. To further engage the students in his conversations, Coach tossed a special basketball, this one, to kids as he talked. After conducting sessions in each community, he would add that specific county to the growing list written on the ball. This was documentation of where he and LO had been and who still had yet to hear his message. Every county produced memories that will never be forgotten. Whether it was a sincere welcome and appreciation from a principal or teacher, thanking the Roses for caring enough about their students to give of their time and energy, a shy child garnering the courage to ask or answer a question out loud, or the affirmation of their pledge card to stay the course and complete their education. Each person who crossed the paths with Coach were forever changed. I would like to share two quick memories that stand out with me. The first was a young lady who saw the only way she would be able to complete high school and further her education was by getting an athletic scholarship because she had zero family support. As she fought back the tears at the conclusion of his presentation, Coach spent the next 30 minutes talking with her and a counselor, helping to devise a viable plan for her future. Secondly, I observed a small young boy having intently listened to each word of Coach's message. When asked what he had learned as a result of the session, he replied, "I didn't know that you just couldn't quit." This little guy probably summed up in his 8 words what many others felt or were afraid to verbalize. This inspiration filled everyone in the room. From the start to the end of the 5-year-plus middle school project, more than 11,000 students and countless adults heard Coach's recipe for success. They witnessed his sincere interest in their current and future endeavors. For some, that may have been the first time they had sincerely taken interest in them. But most of all, they experienced his love, validation, each and every one of them. Education was his stepping stone in Appalachia to see the world, and it would be theirs too. Music, medicine, carpentry, writing, whatever their passion, it could be their ticket to life success. Coach Rose and LO were recognized by Forward in the Fifth in 2012 by receiving its Difference Maker Award. Presented by Congressman Hal Rogers, he noted their dedication and tireless efforts given for the students of Appalachia will never be forgotten. The gift of an education can never be taken away. Thank you so much. While many of you had the pleasure of knowing Coach Rose for years, the young people he and LO mentored during their partnership with Forward in the Fifth's middle school program has been priceless. I would trade nothing for my experience in traveling Appalachia with them and know his vision of planting a tree under which future generations can enjoy has grown into reality. On behalf of all of us, we thank Coach for putting others first. In closing, Coach was a servant to the core. He strived to pull the best from everyone he came in contact with. When receiving a copy of his Winning Basketball Fundamentals book, I opened the front cover and saw this penned in his handwriting: "No man stands so tall as when he stoops to help a child." Coach, thank you for your tremendous example and stature witnessed by us all. The world truly is a better place because of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise and Jim. Before I bring the next set of speakers up, I have a confession. I almost didn't do what I asked you to do earlier, and that's turn off your cell phones, because I'm waiting for an any minute now call that I will be a first-time grandfather. So if I seem at all distracted, that's it. I cannot wait. One of the reasons that I'm so excited is because I can only hope that my grandchildren turn out as fine as the ones you're about to hear from. These kids will come up and speak their hearts and minds, and then followed by that are 2 men that I have known since they were practically toddlers, who have grown up to be extraordinary men, very much in the likeness of their father, Mark and Mike. Grandchildren, if you would. We'll hear from Lee, Christy, James, and Zan.
All right, thanks for everybody for being here. I'm Lee, the oldest grandchild. Good. So, as I thought about what to say over the last 6 to 8 weeks, as I realized that I was going to be up here speaking, it started for me that what I wrote, it started "Be kind," and that's kind of where it starts and ends for me with Grandpa Lee. And that was the lesson that I think he taught the grandchildren. Certainly my sister and I, as we'd visit his home in Milwaukee and their home in Charlotte. And I think for us, he lived it. And certainly we didn't play for him, we didn't coach for him, he didn't run us, we didn't have to do some of the things that you guys may have had to do. But when I think about him, as I looked up the definition of kindness, it's defined by acts of generosity, consideration, concern for others, without expecting praise or reward in return. And as I think about my grandfather, I think he lived that. Obviously, Alzheimer's is a difficult disease, and throughout his entire struggle and battle towards the end of his life, he exhibited kindness to everyone that he encountered. One of my joys was attending physical therapy with him. In 2017, I had the opportunity to drive him to physical therapy at the orthopedic center, and it was fun for me to walk into the facility with him because everyone loved him so much, because he was kind to them, because they loved him, and he brought a smile to their face. I'll always be inspired by how gracefully Grandma Ello and Grandpa Lee handled every obstacle and hurdle that they had to handle over the last 5 years. Towards the end of 2017, I left to go coach overseas in Poland. And this was in one of the earlier stages. We could call it a middle stage. I'm not exactly sure what stage we were in. But certainly there was a lot of moments of clarity, more moments of clarity than confusion. Over the years, our conversations became less intelligible and more infrequent. And as I returned home, I realized that a part of him would always place me in Poland, where I coached. And it was a bit funny at times. He would ask me, how's the weather? Is it cold where you are? Because he was always very worried it was cold in Poland. And sometimes I would say yes, it's quite cold. But for me, in my mind, when I remember my grandfather, now that he's gone, he and I are together, somewhere. And the place that I'm with him is on the way to a Charlotte Hornets game, or the training facility in the summer for the Hornets. As we see some basketballs up here, he coached for the Charlotte Hornets from 1996 to 2001, and these are kind of you hope, golden years of a child's life, where you don't have as many worries and concerns. And I was able to spend those 5 years with my grandfather, going to NBA games or the training facility 3 hours early, sometimes with him, sometimes wandering around unobserved. But they were great moments. And he would tell me, you will never work a day in your life if you love what you do. And sometimes he would tell me this while he's writing a report that might go unnoticed, or doing something he might not enjoy doing. But I know he loved coaching. I know he loved the relationships with his players and his coaches. And it struck me as a kid that I always wanted to be an NBA player. And then I realized that probably wasn't going to happen. I said, okay, I could probably be a coach. And so even today, so now I'm coaching college football, and I'm really loving it. And even today, now I get to be around that atmosphere and build the relationships with my fellow coaches and my players. And I think that was something that was instilled in me just in those early days and interactions with Grandpa Lee. To also know Grandpa Lee is to know Grandma Ello's father, Opa. And a week ago, I was at their house, and I borrowed a book. It had been laying there, and unbeknownst to us, on the back cover was a quote from Opa to the nursing facility, the rehab facility that his wife was staying at. His wife, our Opa's wife, died of Alzheimer's as well. And he writes, to the facility, to you who work, your hands are their strength today, but even now, younger hands are growing strong to bear you up when you are old. And so I just want to be able to thank all of the doctors and the caregivers in this last stage of life that did an amazing job of giving Grandpa Lee strength, giving Grandma Ella strength when they needed it, And that's how I'd like to close. So thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Zan. I'm the youngest grandchild. I'm going to keep this short because I'm really not much of a speaker. I'm a lot more of a listener. And I think a lot of you will know what I say when I loved listening to Grandpa Lee. You know, whether it was stories about basketball or just stories about how to guide me through my first 20 years of life. I love my grandfather, and those are the things that I'm going to think about when I think about Grandpa Lee, those stories. And, you know, I just love my grandfather, and those are the memories that I'll keep in mind through my next 20 years. Thank you.
Hello, I am Christy. I am Lee Rose's granddaughter. I can't lie, I procrastinated in writing this speech for as long as I could. Maybe it was because describing how Grandpa Lee meant to me was harder than I thought, or maybe it was because once my words hit paper, it made Grandpa Lee's passing real. When I was 5, my grandparents moved from Milwaukee to Charlotte, and if that wasn't good enough, we ended up living in the same neighborhood as them. Grandpa Lee was a great coach. He loved every minute of it, coaching boys to men and better basketball players. He was also an incredible father to 2 boys. However, that certainly didn't prepare him when becoming a grandfather to a little girl. But did he ever rise to the occasion, as he always does? He made a distinct effort to be present and involved when spending time with me. He never let the demands from coaching interrupt when I would visit him. He'd stop being Coach Lee and become devoted to becoming 100% Grandpa Lee when we were spending time together. Grandpa Lee loved and connected to each one of his grandchildren differently, unique to their own personalities. To me, he was my student when I made him play teacher when I was little, which was created for the strongest of students. My dance partner, twirling around the kitchen with listening to James Taylor, and my tennis coach, which has helped me to this day in beating my brother. Even at a young age, I found Grandpa Lee to be very profound with his words. When he talked, everyone made sure to stop and listen, which, if you knew me as a child, was a little tricky. I wanted to make sure I caught every word that was said. He spoke with passion, wisdom, and sincerity. I will always remember him as a peaceful man, which maybe some players or even coaches or my dad or uncle would maybe disagree at times. But to me, he was always calm and gentle. He loved fiercely and protected his family more than anything. You could always count on him wanting to know how we were doing in school, sports, or if there was anything that he could do to help us. That's who he was, a helper. Even towards the end of his life, he always wanted to make sure his family was all right and we didn't need anything. One of the many memories that I share with my brother and my cousins is when Grandpa Lee would go to his bookcase, grab the moral compass, and pick a short story to read to us. This book, as you can see, has been cherished and adored, with pages bent as bookmarks, sticky notes stuck to remember our favorite stories, and notes written in hidden places. This book has been treasured. One of the stories that I not only remember, but still to this day refer to, is called Beautiful Hands. And I'll leave you with reading that story today. Some young girls were talking by the brook, boasting of their beautiful hands. One of them dipped her hands into sparkling water, and the drops looked like diamonds falling from her palms. "See what beautiful hands I have? The water runs from them like precious jewels," she said, and held up her hands for others to admire. They were very soft and white, for she had never done anything but wash them in clear, cold water. Another one of them ran to get some strawberries and crushed them in her palms. The juice ran through her fingers like wine from a wine press until her fingers were as pink as the sunrise in the early morning. "See what beautiful hands I have? The strawberry juice runs over them like wine," she said, and she held up her hands for the others to admire. They were very pink and soft, for she had never done anything but wash them in strawberry juice every morning. Another one gathered some violets and crushed the flowers in her hands until they smelled like perfume. See what beautiful hands I have. They smell like violets in the deep wood in the springtime, she said, and she held them up for the others to admire. They were very soft, for she had never done anything but wash them in violets every morning. The fourth girl did not show her hands and held them in her lap. An old woman came down the road and stopped before the girls. They all showed her their hands and asked which one were the most beautiful. She shook her head at each one and then asked to see the hands of the last girl, who held hers in her lap. The last girl raised her hands timidly for the old woman to see. "Oh, these hands are clean indeed," said the old woman, "but they are hard from toil. These hands have been helping mother and father dry dishes and sweep the floor and wash the windows and weed the garden. These hands have been taking care of the baby and carrying hot tea to grandma and showing little brother how to build his blocks and fly his kite. Yes, these hands have been busy making the house a happy home full of love and care." Then the old woman fumbled in her pocket and brought out a ring set with diamonds, with rubies redder than strawberries, and turquoise bluer than violets. "Here, wear this ring, my child. You deserve the prize for the most beautiful hands, for they have been the most helpful." And the woman vanished, leaving all the four girls sitting by the brook.
Hi, everyone. Let's take a deep breath in. Let it go. I'm James. I'm number 4 of the grandchildren today, and will this stay perfect? And I had the pleasure of living with my grandmother and my grandfather for the last about year and a half of his life. I'm an actor and I work with LGBTQ youth, and I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, we can only hope. And while I was living in Charlotte, I kept a journal of the last couple of years of his life, and I picked 4 excerpts because I want to invite you into our family today. And for me as a writer, this has always been a form of clarity for things that are too big to fit in my chest that I don't understand. I try to put them on paper and see if maybe they'll make sense to somebody, and I hope this offers you something. October 8th, 2020. You see, when I moved in, I knew what I was doing, or at least that's what I tell myself. I surrendered my ground-level slice of New York City while this pandemic decimates my career to help care for my grandfather while Alzheimer's decimates his brain. Should be fun. The cruelty of this transaction is that I knowingly forfeit the pristine memories of my relationship with my grandfather to slowly have them overshadowed by caring for him at the end of his life. Once he was the man who taught me patience, acceptance, the value of hard work, good handwriting, and organization. Now I employ those skills to care for him, as he may inevitably forget who I am. For as long as I can remember, my grandfather took me to Barnes & Noble every family visit to pick out a book, and if I was lucky, a chocolate chunk cookie from the cafe. It is one of my favorite memories. It's where I learned to love literature, the power of ideas communicated through word, the architecture of my life that made me a writer. Tonight he was agitated, and I found myself not knowing what to do, so I began reading his own memoir to him. Perhaps I chose it out of some naive hope that it will magically thread the memories back into the tattered fabric of his brain and reverse this wretched disease. Every few pages, something will jog his memory, and he'll perk up with a, "Oh yes," or "Now what you have to understand." And for a second, it's as if nothing is wrong at all. I can't decide if it's painful or poignant that our relationship ends just as it begun. One of us is unable to read, and the other is reading to them aloud. Tomorrow night, I'm going to bake chocolate chunk cookies. I don't really know what I'm doing, but this seems like a start. March 28th, 2021. My grandfather sits by the window in his wheelchair, pointing out the same crimson bundle of feathers pecking at the feeders we set for his enjoyment. It is the 9th time he has made that observation this hour. I watch with him as the birds retreat from their food, as he sometimes does at dinner, only to return a breath later. He sits here every morning, bobbing in the waves of bewilderment and lucidity that characterize this cruel neurological decline that he has lived with for the past 5 years. The truth is, he is the most honest out of all of us. He says what he feels, he laughs with the purest glee, and the mess in the bathroom is nothing if not the carceral truth of our animalistic form. I almost envy his unfiltered existence. He can eat, sleep, shit wherever he wants, and no one protest at all. What he thinks is law, absent of emotional entanglement or clouded with any judgment that keep me in the eternal hopscotch of decision-making where I am ever terrified I will run out of feet or places to jump, or both. My envy is tempered with Alzheimer's feral trademark. He forgets one of our names while examining a family photo. I hear his wheels, trepidatious and rounding into the kitchen, outstretched for the bottom shelf where he plucks the milk with great effort. I silently thank myself for remembering to refill his jar on time. One less thing he knows I've done for him ensures one more rung of dignity in a ladder he cannot climb and I do not speak of. He is still there, though he fades. He follows conversations with the precision of a radio, constantly tuning between stations, catching words and phrases between the static change. He is both unlearned child and wise philosopher. I cannot distinguish the two. I wonder if I hesitate to say I love you because of the strength of its signal, or out of fear that it will land crestfallen among the static, only to be harvested out from the feeder by the birds he will assuredly point out again the next morning. August 28th, 2021. Today a reporter came. I can't help but think after years of press conferences and articles and photos and journalists, this is perhaps his last media interview. As he does with every guest in the house, he asked the reporter, "Can I get you anything?" The man quietly declined. He has not yet learned that answering yes allows my grandfather to wheel into the kitchen long enough to forget what he was there for, which affords him a modicum of dignity. He is helping. He is valuable. He is part of the team. He must have asked him 7 times, "Can I help you?" It's the phrase I hear most from his mouth. It is spoken with the same inflection as it was 15 years ago, and sometimes hearing it catapults me back to being 8 years old, trying to decide what book to read, or being 15 years old trying to decide what high school to go to. "Can I help you?" It is one of his last remaining full phrases. I think if words were printed on the soul, those would be his. How is it that after everything Alzheimer's has taken from him, it has not managed to steal a servant's spirit? As this disease strips him of his memory, his personality, his identity, there is a cruel purity to knowing what has always been the core of this man is a desire to help and love and care. "Can I help you?" "No, Grandpa Lee, not anymore. But I am here to help you now, and you taught me that." April 14th, 2022. I don't know if I believe in death anymore. For years, as my grandfather's brain deteriorated, he would sit on the porch and talk to the birds. Whistles, chirps, rattles, and coos heard all the way into the kitchen as he watched them flit around the feeder in the nearest tree. I don't know what was stranger, the fact that he talked to the birds or the fact that they talked back. The redbirds were his favorite. They echoed him in near perfect mimicry as they darted around the mammoth tree in our yard that, in his later years, seemed the only thing that could hold his attention. When the initial embarrassment wore off, imagine explaining to a guest on the phone that the noises were not the wildlife. It became almost endearing. My grandmother and I would wheel him out to the porch for his daily conversation with his local feathered friends, and God knows what they would talk about, but they would talk for an hour. And my grandmother and I would breathe or cry or cook, whatever stage of grief we happened to be in. "Do you think the birds will know when he dies?" I said to my grandmother one day. She looked over at him, waving his arms at the birds from the wheelchair where he was perched. "I don't know," she said. It was one of the days when we cried. Outside the window of his bed, where he spent his final days, reached the last branches of the bird tree. He could still see them from his window. The day he died, it was storming, one of those North Carolina thunderstorms that drives all the birds to find shelter in the trees. But as he lay there, one of us looked up to see the redbirds perched on the windowsill, tattered and wet and silent. They stayed there in the rain until he finished his last breath, and they too flew away. Both of them are free now. I don't know if I believe in death anymore, but every time I see a red bird, I believe in life. Thank you.
If I've got it here, can you hear me? Good. I walk and talk a little bit. I'm Mark. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to everybody who... part of the Style Police. I didn't know they were doing that. Thanks to everybody who helped put this event together. Thanks for everybody here at UNCC. I told somebody earlier, I said, my speech is only about 8 minutes, but it takes me about 28 minutes to get through it. So we'll see how this goes. And before I start talking about all the things I'm thankful to Dad for, I'd like to tell you one that I'm not. Dad had kidney stones, and it's genetic, and it got passed down, and it's no fun, okay? So no thanks for that. I've written a poem. Poems are big in our family. We get creative with Roses Are Red poems for special occasions. So I decided that a poem was appropriate here. In this poem, note that I will interchange I or me for we or us, because I can't separate out where some of my story starts or ends and where it involves my brother Mike. We were just like that. So I also changed Dad from talking he, because I was going to tell the story to y'all, and then I changed it to you because I figured I was writing to Dad, so don't get me on that. And then there's a couple of times where I'm just going to kind of go into free verse here. You'll know that because it won't rhyme, all right? And it's called Dear Dad, Thank You, Lessons I've Learned. And it starts with my first memory of Dad. It goes like this. The forts and blocks and towers you built, I woke up to at age 3. Because you went to work before I woke and came home when I was asleep. He left that Cincinnati job, I later learned, because it bothered him so. To be away from his family so much, he wanted to see us grow. For bedtime stories you made up, Droopy, the main character, was called. For bedtime songs like King of the Road and the Wabash Cannonball. Dad acknowledged that he couldn't sing a lick or carry well a tune, but every home we ever owned had music fill the rooms. From James Taylor to Carole King to Harry Chapin, The Fifth Dimension to Broadway plays, from Charlie Pride to Yo-Yo Ma, he exposed us to music in wonderful ways. Early morning, hot summer days, blue jeans and long sleeve shirts or sweatshirts, and across the field we'd go to pick blackberries in the thicket. We had the sweatshirts on to keep us from the thorns. I had a small can, a little soup can. Dad had a coffee can string around his neck. And then we had a big Charlie chip can. And I'd pour my small can into Dad's can, and then he'd take his. Mike was with us too when we could drag Mike there. And then he'd pour the big can, his coffee can, into the Charlie chip can, and on and on and on it went until we filled the Charlie chip can full of blackberries. And then we'd fill the coffee can, and then we'd fill the small soup can. And only after all the cans were full would we walk back across the field and go home. And to fill those cans berry by berry, we learned about small steps and persistence. And that night, over Mom's blackberry cobbler and vanilla ice cream, we learned that hard work paid off. For pulling us out of school and putting us on the team bus, you were a big part of what you did, and what you did was a big part of us. You said travel was educational and took us on the road. Berea, Nashville, Ecuador, Pikeville, Danville, Terre Haute. You took us with you when you'd speak to civic clubs or banquets for teams. We learned about morals, honesty, character, about setting goals and chasing dreams. Mom got a break, and we learned from our dad as we'd listen to his voice. From the wise old man in the story, we learned that everything's a choice. You'd introduce us every time and have us stand up in groups large or small. And in rooms full of players and parents and friends, you made two little boys feel 100 feet tall. I remember walking down to the high school football field one afternoon when I was about 7 years old. Mom was on the front row of the bleachers holding a stopwatch. And Dad was on the track running sprints. Not just sprints, 220-yard sprints. Over and over and over again, he ran the sprints, and over and again, she timed him, and then he timed the intervals between the sprints. For those unfamiliar, this was beginning of the eights. For 220 yards is an eighth of a mile. 7 times from baseline to baseline, different times for the bigs and the forwards and the guards. Touch the line every time. Thank you for teaching me that a handshake matters and that your word is as good as a bond, that your actions speak so loud they won't hear your words. These are lessons I've tried to pass on. For up and down the river, our favorite game of cards, for summer carnivals and cookouts you made happen in our backyard. You and Mom made our house the place to be, built the court, cut the field, and threw us BP. For all the kids in the neighborhood, our home was their home. They knew it was safe and good. Dad always had a book in hand, on the table or by his bed. Wendell Berry, Kurt Vonnegut, Richard Bach, and Mark Twain were among the favorites that he read. Dad's financial advice was simple. It was short and concise and can be distilled into 3 simple lines. If they're selling Cadillacs for a quarter, don't go into the store if you've only got a dime. For the good things on the earth, we are thankful, Dad would say before our meals. I'm going to give you Dad's favorite meal. It was a big pile of green beans covered with sliced tomatoes, corn cut off the cob, topped with cottage cheese. And when Mom wasn't there to cook for us, well, we just had cereal. You didn't care what path we chose or if athletics were our call, pick piano or science or anything, but what you pick, you give it your all. Be the first to come, the last to leave, the hardest worker on the field. It doesn't matter what you pick, but when you pick it, that's the deal. You wanted me to have my own path and never stand in the way or take the spotlight from me. And from high school through my college days, this is what you'd say. I understand you have a game today. I'd say, that's right, I do. You'd say, I'd like to come if that's okay, but I don't want to distract you. I'd say, thanks, I hope you'll come. It's not a distraction, I'll be fine. But Dad knew he'd draw a crowd, so he'd take his lawn chair and sit at the end of the right field foul line. Then after the game on the car ride home, whether the results were good or bad, he'd say, you gave good effort. I'm proud of you. Not coach, but rather my dad. While in high school, I woke in the middle of the night to a humming and clicking sound. I made my way out toward the light, and this is what I found. Dad was watching game film projected on our living room wall. Back and forth, stop, rewind, go again. The film would go. Time mattered not at all. He worked to seek out every edge and planned practices to the minute. He incorporated analytics well ahead of his time. He pushed his players to reach their limits. He was hard in the practices, prepared for the games. And though the shots didn't always fall, you could rest assured when the buzzer expired that the right player shot the ball. Dad was hilariously oblivious to events and trends. His pronunciation of popular names were scary. Luka would have been Donacek. Giannis wouldn't stand a chance. And while at Purdue, I jokingly started calling him Harry, only in the family and out of humor and love, because his intense focus was so laser and locked, the polar opposite of Harry Carey, then the rambling announcer of baseball's White Sox. Well, there's Mom and there's Dad. And you better be thinking about your mother if you didn't want to make Dad mad. Their love story could be a book. Oh, wait, thanks to Joe, it is one. The love of his life from Tennessee and Kentucky's native son. I saw them dance in the family room when peeking down the stairs. I saw them dance at weddings. I saw them dance in his wheelchair. A love like theirs only comes around once in a very long while. I think of Dad and I think of them both. It makes my whole memory smile. I didn't know if I was going to do this one, but I think I'm going to give a short story about our next speaker and why he is alive today to speak to you. It's brief, but it falls with take care of your mother. So when we were in high school, Mike got pretty big and strong, and he went towards football, and Dad was on the road a lot. And one day we were in the kitchen. This is when we were at Purdue. Mike was getting pretty darn big and strong, and something happened, and he and Mom were going at it, and I don't know what it was about. But what I do remember distinctly is what Mike did. And what he did, folks, is he reached over, and he'd had about enough, and he picked Mom up, and he set her on top of the refrigerator. And I looked, and there's my mom sitting on top of the refrigerator, and there's Mike. I can't do anything about this. We didn't tell that story to Dad for 30 years because we couldn't. How can I help you? Is there anything you need? I love you. He ended all calls and visits with these words. But it wasn't just us, minus the I love you, I guess, for whom these words were reserved. Shelter, soup kitchen, Special Olympics, Forward in the Fifth, countless people throughout the years. Perhaps he helped you. I know he helped me, so much it brings me to tears. How can you help me? Dad, right now I'm good. I'm in a gym filled with all this love. Our family's together. We'll take good care of Mom. And there's a banner of you up above. I'll talk to you later like I do every night, but right now I must wrap up this poem. And on the other hand, we'll turn this over to Mike so we can get all these good people home. In conclusion, I'll say, when I look back on life, that the world's filled with two kinds of dads. There's the one that you got by sheer fortune at birth, and the one you wish you'd had. Mine was both. Thank you.
Well, we're behind schedule. That's what Dad would say. Bus is leaving. We're out of here. This has been fantastic, and this family's got some good speakers, and man, y'all have done a great job, and thank you for everybody that's come. So my speech is 10 minutes, like Joe alluded. I've practiced it 100 times. I've got it written down, and that's what Dad taught us to do. So I'm going to go ahead and roll with it. Some of it's been said. When you speak last, some of this stuff's been said, but I'm going to go ahead. So in May 2018, I traveled to Bloomington, Indiana to pay my respects to my college football coach, Bill Mallory. Coach Mallory was a great leader, and just like today, former players and coaches came from all over the country to gather in his honor. His 3 sons, all coaches themselves, are friends of mine, and they spoke at his funeral. Sitting in that pew in 2018, I knew this day was coming. Why did we, for Coach Mallory, and you, for my father, travel so far, some of you, to pay respects to someone that you may not have seen for 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Because it's what you do. It's just what you do. You travel to pay respects to a man that has somehow changed your life. A man that has said words that you remember when things are hard. A man that has instilled in you a work ethic that you call upon when needed. A man that has somehow changed you to your core. Who knows, even a man that may have saved your life. Now, we've been sitting for an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. If you played or worked for Dad, please stand up. Each one of you has put your lives on pause, and many of you have traveled great distances to honor a man you are proud to call your coach. I would ask that all of you take a few moments to make eye contact with those in this room that can call Lee Rose my coach. Please stay standing. Please stay standing. If you are here and you knew Dad from any walk of life, please stand. If you knew him, stand. If you wanted to know him, stand. Matt Blanton, stand. So each of you has been influenced in some way. Dad had many sayings. One I use a lot is that leadership is lonely and you will never see a flock of eagles. Well, today we have proved that wrong, because I can indeed see a flock of eagles, because I'm looking at one now. A group of people that have been impacted for the better by a special teacher to become better leaders, better spouses, better parents, better business people, and better citizens, because Lee Rose was either their coach, their friend, or both. Please have a seat. My father did not coach basketball. He coached young men. There's a difference. Here's some of the things he taught them. Mental toughness, humility, compassion, a sense of urgency, discipline, pride, leadership, responsibility, love, faith, accountability, study habits, kindness, goal setting, empathy, decision making, importance of tipping servers and valets when you're traveling, thank you notes, how to tie a tie, how to polish shoes, causes greater than yourself, and how to get up early, and certainly how to be on time. Everything you need to know to be successful and be a good citizen is what he taught. So if you want to say he just coached basketball, then be my guest. Great coaches, great leaders, great teachers, like an artist, they take their platform and they turn it into a canvas upon which they paint and they mold young people. Coach Mallory did that with us, only he used football. My brother does that in Tampa, only he uses baseball. My son is doing it at Chapel Hill, and he uses football. Many of you in this room are coaches and teachers and business people, and you are doing it. It's not the game, it's the coach, it's the teacher. Some people have an innate ability to speak into your very soul. And when you are in their presence, you feel it, and you know that you are with someone special. That is exactly what I felt every day of my life when I was around my dad. He was a born leader. He just was. You cannot teach it, but when you see it, you recognize it. Dad knew basketball inside and out, but what he knew, what he really knew, was how to connect with the heartbeat of the young men that played for him. Was he easy to play for? Ask these guys. No. No, he wasn't. Was he easy to play for, Max? Absolutely not. Is life easy? Is marriage easy? Is succeeding at anything easy? Winning is hard. Being successful is hard. Dad loved winning, but he hated losing more. If you want big bags of fun, Christy, go play for the worst team in the league. They have a great time, but they aren't worth a damn. I'm not the fun guy in our house. Dad was demanding, and Dad was tough. He did not listen to a lot of excuses. As a leader, Dad was high intensity, wound up into a ball of organization and fierce determination. He never asked more of his coaches or players than he asked for himself. He was a tireless worker. He truly lived by another one of his sayings, which was, the disappointment in losing is in direct proportion to the amount of energy expended in trying to win. Dad was fair. He lived by the code, nothing is unequal as the equal treatment of unequals. To him who much is given, much is expected. He loved the parable of the talents. And as young boys, Mark and I must have heard that story told 250 times as we went with him to speeches and banquets. It did not matter how many talents you had, you best bring them all every day. Dad was always more demanding on the players with more talent. Yes, he was tough, but he loved his players. Loved him with all his heart and soul. I would bet you that 90% of our conversations growing up were about his team, his players, and we all loved it. Who had a good home? Who had challenges? Who made good decisions? Who needed help? We talked about leadership, team chemistry, the intangibles of life. He loved having players over the house to be around us. For some of his players, that might be the only time they were in a home where family love was actually lived out. The players loved coming over, certainly not to see him, but for Mom's delicious whatever she was making that day. We had players over during the holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas are both during basketball, and not all of them could always get home. Last page. Stay on time. You were fortunate to have played or worked for him. Mark and I were his sons. What lucky men we are. No brothers in the history of time have been prouder of their father than we were. Dad was the dad that all our friends wanted their dads to be. Mark and I loved going with him to the gym. We were so proud just to be with him, and he knew, and we knew. I know he was proud of us. At least he was proud of me. We loved snow days because we could go hang out in the gym all day with Dad and just be around. We went with him everywhere, recruiting, camps, and games. Dad was strong in his faith. As you've heard, he was so well-read, intelligent, and open to all ideas that bettered the condition of humanity. He was our leader spiritually, and I thank him for his guidance. In the summer, Dad loved picking blackberries, and later that night, eating homemade blackberry cobbler with ice cream, followed by a card game of up the river, down the river. Dad loved being with his family and his grandchildren. Man, did he ever love his grandchildren. He could relax and just be with them. When it came to love, nobody did Dad love more than Mom. Man, did he ever love her, and she him. 63 years of marriage. Travels around the world, wins, losses, highs, lows, life. What she did for him these last 5 to 7 years was so hard. And that's commitment. It's just what you do. What a beautiful relationship they had, they still have, and they will forever have. In closing, I want to talk about the saying that to me fits Dad the best. One true measure of a person is how he treats those people around him who are in absolutely no position to help him. As you've heard, in the year 2000, Dad was in New York City for a game with the Knicks, and he read an article in the New York Times describing illiteracy in Appalachia. For whatever reason, the timing was exactly right for this to make a profound impact on my father, and he contacted, I'm sure Mom did, Forward in the Fifth, an organization whose goal was to help the underserved in the 5th Congressional District in the state of Kentucky. As you've heard, Dad saw a need, and in the year 2005, he and Mom started going to the Appalachian Mountains and giving back. Between 2005 and 2017, they traveled over 10,000 miles, visited 42 counties, and spoke to over 11,000 children. Think about that. 11,000 damn children. Where are they now? Well, they're between 25 and 27 years old. If we say 35% are married and with one child, that impact has now grown to 18,700. Are some teachers and coaches and preaches the same message? I hope so. Dad liked a good challenge, so I'll end with one. I will challenge all of us to please do whatever we can do to help someone less fortunate every day. I don't know how you'll do it. That is up to you. Please just make sure you do it. Take your job, especially if you're in a leadership position, and turn it into a canvas upon which you will change lives. Nothing would make Coach Rose prouder than if you did that. God bless you all, the Rose family. Thank you for coming, and I don't know where we go from here, Dave, so why don't you come up here and tell us? All right, go upstairs, and there's refreshments up there. Thank you.